You submitted paperwork for a Special Forces cadre position, Miss Cross. Did you bring your own coffee? Or were you hoping the real soldiers here would point you toward the machine? The question drops through the reception office like a blade scraping across cold steel, and for a moment even the wall clock above the counter seems to hold its breath. Captain Nathaniel Voss says it loud enough for the room to hear. That is the point. 6 soldiers standing in line behind the counter to file weekend leave paperwork go quiet mid-signature. A staff sergeant near the coffee station lowers his mug without drinking from it. Voss wants an audience, and now he has one. He is 34, built like a recruiting poster, chest heavy with ribbons that speak to deployments he talks about more than anyone ever asked him to. He stands with his arms crossed, the posture of a man who believes he owns not just this counter, but the entire accessions pipeline behind it. When he steps closer, his shadow falls across the folder she has placed neatly between them. He does not move to let the light back through. The overhead air conditioning hums at a pitch just loud enough to notice, competing with the low murmur of the 6 soldiers still frozen at the counter. Through the window behind the reception desk, 43 additional troops can be seen crossing the parade field toward afternoon formation, none of them aware that the next 90 seconds inside this building will end a career. She is 32. Plain civilian jacket, hair pulled into a regulation tight bun despite the fact that nothing about her paperwork requires it. No rank insignia, no unit patch. Nothing on her announces anything at all. On her left wrist sits a plain analog watch, civilian grade, the kind nobody in this building would think to look at twice. The kind a person wears only after learning the hard way that anything more distinctive gets noticed by the wrong people at the wrong time. She does not look up at him. Her hands rest on the folder with a stillness that looks less like calm and more like control. The kind of stillness that comes from learning, years ago, that the first person to flinch is the first person to lose. Her hands are precise, calloused in places that have nothing to do with typing. When she finally slides the folder 1 inch closer to him, the motion is economical, the kind that doesn't waste energy on anything but its intended purpose. "Depends which real soldiers you mean, Captain," she says. 8 words. She does not raise her voice. She does not look at the soldiers now watching from the counter. She returns her eyes to the folder, and that is the entire extent of her reaction. Voss laughs. It's the kind of laugh that invites everyone else in the room to join him, and 2 soldiers near the coffee station do, not because they find it funny, but because his rank makes agreement the safer option. Near the file cabinets at the back of the office, Chief Warrant Officer 4 Frank Delgado does not laugh. He is 61 years old, 38 years into a career that started before some of the soldiers in this room were born, and he has learned to watch people instead of listening to them. He notices the way she folds her hands, not nervous, not defensive, but arranged, like a soldier standing at parade rest out of habit, rather than instruction. He notices her boots, civilian issue and unremarkable, broken in at an angle that only comes from carrying weight across uneven ground for years, not months. He says nothing. His pen, resting against a personnel log he was updating, stops moving. He has 38 years of watching people walk into this building, trying to prove something, and in that time he has learned that the ones who perform loudest usually have the least to back it up, and the ones who say nothing usually carry entire histories nobody in the room is cleared to hear. Voss opens her folder without asking permission. He flips through 3 pages with the theatrical impatience of a man performing diligence rather than practicing it. No unit listed, no current assignment, No emergency contact past 2019. He looks up at her, and his smile sharpens into something closer to satisfaction. You want us to process you into a classified cadre position, and you can't even fill out a form correctly. The form is correct, she says. The file behind it isn't yours to see yet. The room goes very quiet, not the quiet of confusion. The quiet of people recalculating what they just heard. Voss doesn't recalculate. He escalates instead. Careful, he says, leaning one forearm on the counter, close enough now that his aftershave crowds the space between them. Around here, we verify everything, especially from people who show up with more mystery than paperwork. She breathes. 4 counts in. Hold 4. 4 counts out. Hold 4. Nobody in the room notices this except Delgado, who has seen exactly one other person breathe like that in his career, 22 years ago, in a briefing room he was never supposed to talk about again. I understand, she says. Verify it. Voss doesn't expect agreement. He expects panic, or protest, or the retreat he has learned to expect from anyone who challenges his authority in front of witnesses. Instead, she picks her documents back up, squares them against the counter with 2 efficient taps, and waits. Sergeant, Voss says to the soldier nearest him, not breaking eye contact with her. Pull her ID through the system. Full background trace. If there's a discrepancy, I want it flagged before she leaves this building. Copy, sir, the sergeant says, already moving. Delgado watches her face for a reaction. There isn't one. Not fear. Not defiance, just the same mechanical stillness she has held since she walked through the door, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from having nothing to hide. It comes from having already accounted for exactly this moment, weeks or months in advance. Voss doesn't see it. He's too busy enjoying the sound of his own decision landing in front of an audience. We'll have you sorted out in no time, he says, and it isn't kindness. It's a threat wearing a smile. She nods once. Take your time, Captain, she says. I have somewhere to be either way. By the time the background trace comes back inconclusive rather than clean, word has already spread through the building the way rumors do inside any installation smaller than a small town. In the mess hall by noon, 3 tables away, someone repeats an exaggerated version of the exchange, embellished with details that never happened, that she cursed at Voss, that she tried to walk out, that security had to be called twice instead of once. By 1300, the story has a nickname. By 1400, half the cadre is calling her Ghost Girl without knowing why, only that the name feels appropriate for someone with no file. At 1445, Voss makes it worse without meaning to make it better for anyone but himself. He carries her folder into the break room and holds it up for 3 other officers to see, reading her blank assignment history aloud like a punchline. No unit, no emergency contact, no explanation. He gets the laugh he's fishing for. What he doesn't get is the look on the face of Major Ibarra, the only officer in the room who has ever worked liaison duty alongside a classified detachment, who goes very quiet, very fast, and says almost nothing to anyone for the rest of the day. She eats alone at the end of a long table, a tray of institutional efficient food in front of her that she works through with the same mechanical precision she brings to everything else. She is not isolated by accident. She has chosen the seat with the clearest sightline to both doors, and while she eats, she listens, not to the mockery, which she filed away as irrelevant hours ago, but to the patterns underneath it. Who defers to whom? Where authority actually moves inside a building that pretends its org chart tells the whole story. She is gathering information while appearing to be nothing more than today's punchline, and if anyone in the mess hall understood what they were watching, they would stop laughing immediately. She notes, without turning her head, that the supply sergeant 3 tables over signs for shipments he never personally inspects. She notes that 2 lieutenants near the drink station stop talking whenever a certain colonel's name comes up in conversation. The particular carefulness of people who have learned not to ask questions about him out loud. None of it is why she's here. All of it goes into the same mental ledger anyway, because old habits, like old debts, do not retire on schedule. Delgado watches this too. That afternoon, in the equipment room adjacent to the security checkpoint, a jammed badge printer becomes his excuse to watch her more closely. Half of the admin building funnels through this room to have visitor credentials issued, and the machine has been sticking for a week. When it locks up in front of her, she doesn't wait for someone to fix it. She reaches over, disengages a jammed feed mechanism with 2 fingers, resets it in under 4 seconds, and hands it back to the corporal running the desk without comment. It's a small thing. Delgado's pen stops again. An hour later, she inputs a rotating 6-digit authentication code into the visitor terminal to access the records annex. Most people take 4 or 5 attempts in the better part of a minute. She enters it once, correctly, in under 10 seconds, without glancing at the reference card taped to the monitor. The soldier operating the terminal doesn't notice. Delgado, watching from the doorway, does. 20 minutes after that, a full colonel passes through the corridor without insignia visible beneath his field jacket, and she addresses him by correct rank before he says a word. Not because she recognizes his face, but because she reads the exact wear pattern on his boots and the particular way soldiers clear a path in front of him. He glances at her, surprised, and keeps walking. Delgado adds it to the same mental list as the printer and the authentication code. By 1600, she's back in the administrative wing, waiting for Voss's investigation to produce whatever it's going to produce. Her sleeve rides up while she reaches for a pen, just for a moment, just long enough for Delgado to see the edge of a scar along her forearm. Not surgical, not clean, the jagged, irregular kind that comes from shrapnel. From being close enough to something exploding that only training and luck decide who walks away. She lowers her sleeve before anyone else notices. Delgado has seen enough scars like it to know exactly what kind of story it belongs to. There's a 6th detail Delgado files away, without meaning to. When Voss walks past her a second time that afternoon, needling her about the delay, she answers a question about his own assignment history before he finishes asking it, naming an unlisted training rotation from 4 years earlier that isn't part of his official record. The kind of detail nobody outside a very specific community would recognize on sight. Voss laughs it off as a lucky guess. Delgado does not think it is a guess. While she waits near the corridor wall for the escort to processing, she stands the way soldiers stand when nobody is watching to make them, weight balanced evenly, hands loosely clasped at the small of her back, textbook parade rest, the kind that is drilled until it overrides discomfort. Nobody else waiting in that corridor stands like that. Not even the 2 soldiers in uniform beside her. By 1630, Voss has decided the informal humiliation isn't enough. The trace has come back with a discrepancy he can use. Her identification exists, but the personnel record behind it terminates 7 years ago. Flagged inactive, no explanation attached. To a man who mistakes hierarchy for authority, an unexplained gap in a record isn't a mystery to respect. It's a weapon to swing. Before he issues the hold, Voss steps into his office and closes the door long enough to make a call. "Sir, we've got an anomaly." Dead file, no explanation, wants into a cadre slot. A pause. "No, I haven't flagged it upstairs yet. Wanted to run it by you first." On the other end, Colonel Marcus Reyes tells him exactly what Voss wants to hear. Bury the delay in procedure. Make it disappear through paperwork instead of escalation. Voss doesn't ask why his mentor sounds more nervous than annoyed. He never has. Escort her to processing, he tells the duty sergeant, loud enough again for the room to register the decision. Full credential hold until this discrepancy clears. Nobody with a dead file walks into a classified cadre position on my watch. She doesn't argue. She stands, squares her jacket, and follows the escort without a word, which unsettles the duty sergeant more than resistance would have. The walk to the processing room takes 90 seconds. She uses every one of them to note the number of cameras in the ceiling, the location of the fire exits, and the fact that the duty sergeant's sidearm is holstered wrong for someone who claims 11 years of service. None of it will matter in 2 hours. She catalogs it anyway. In the processing room, the questions come fast, clipped, designed to catch inconsistency. What were you doing at 0500 this morning? System diagnostics. Why at 0500? Light traffic. Better performance data. Where were you assigned prior to 2019? Above your clearance. Do we need to notify family of your detention status? No family, or no one to notify. The second one, the sergeant conducting the interview, is the kind of soldier who has done this 100 times and never once had someone answer this calmly. He checks his form twice, taps his pen against the edge of the folder, and writes nothing down for almost 30 seconds. He glances toward the observation window, unsure whether her answer is arrogance or fact. She answers everything the same way, 3 to 5 words, nothing volunteered, nothing defensive, nothing that gives Voss's investigation anything more than what he already has. She breathes. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. Voss watches from behind the glass, arms crossed, certain he is closing in on something. He has confused her calm for an absence of options. He does not understand that her calm is the option. She's hiding something, he says to the sergeant beside him. People don't answer like that unless they're hiding something. Or unless they've done this before, sir, the sergeant says quietly, and Voss doesn't like the implication enough to respond to it. By 1800, Voss has escalated the discrepancy into a full security hold, the kind of designation that exists specifically for situations nobody wants to be responsible for missing. She is moved from the processing room to a holding area down the corridor, and for the first time since she walked into the building that morning, the confident momentum of the day begins to look, from the outside, like it might not be enough. The holding room is 9 feet by 7, concrete block walls painted the same flat gray as every other unremarkable room in the building. A metal bench bolted along one wall, and a single window near the ceiling that shows only a rectangle of darkening sky. The air smells like disinfectant losing a slow fight against something older underneath it. Old sweat, old fear, the residue of every person who has ever sat on this bench, waiting for someone else to decide what happens to them next. Somewhere above the ceiling tile, a ventilation fan clicks on and off in an uneven rhythm, the only irregular sound in an otherwise silent building. She counts it without meaning to. Old habit. In rooms like this, in countries she isn't allowed to name, counting anything steady has kept her sane more than once. She thinks, briefly, of a different room 7 years ago, sand instead of concrete, heat instead of stale air conditioning, and 6 names she has not said out loud since the report that declared all 7 of them casualties in the same afternoon. She was the only name on that list who didn't stay dead. She has spent 7 years making sure nobody found out why. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Detained. Flagged. A dead file, and a captain determined to make an example out of the discrepancy attached to it. Except games have rules, and she is about to show Voss he has been playing the wrong one entirely. She sits on the bench with the same stillness she has carried all day. Her hands rest on her knees. Her breathing stays even. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. She checks her watch. Nobody thought to confiscate it, an oversight so small nobody would think to flag it, which is precisely why she chose to wear one that looks like nothing more than a durable civilian timepiece. It reads 1809. In 23 minutes, a routine biometric scan she submitted as part of Voss's own credential verification process will finish cross-referencing against a database he does not know exists, and a flag will reach a duty officer 3 states away who has been waiting 7 years for exactly this signal. In 63 minutes, a reactivation protocol she set in motion long before she ever filled out this application will complete its automatic sequence, releasing a communication she has been carrying, unopened, for longer than she has let herself think about. In approximately 2 hours, Captain Nathaniel Voss is going to learn the difference between the authority stitched onto his collar and the kind of authority that doesn't need insignia to be recognized. She has run versions of this math before, in worse rooms, with less certainty about which timer would fire first. This time, at least, no one is shooting at her while she waits. She closes her eyes, not from exhaustion, but because there is nothing left to do now except wait. And waiting is a skill she mastered a long time ago, in places this building's occupants have never heard of, and will likely never be briefed on. At 19:02, Chief Warrant Officer Delgado finds Voss in the corridor outside the holding room, reviewing the discrepancy report with the satisfaction of a man who believes the paperwork is already finished. "I'd be careful with this one, sir," Delgado says. It's the first thing he's said all day. Voss barely looks up. Careful of what? A dead file with an attitude problem? "I've seen a grip like hers exactly once before," Delgado says. "At a school most people never hear about. I'd wait for confirmation before you write anything permanent into her record." Voss dismisses it with the kind of confidence that only comes from never once being corrected in a room full of people too junior to try. "Noted," he says, in a tone that means the opposite, and walks back toward his office. 9 minutes later, the building's secure terminal begins flashing an alert nobody in the accessions office has ever seen live outside of a training exercise. It cascades through 3 systems in under a minute: visitor management, base security, and finally the duty desk at the installation's command group, each one escalating the same signal with growing urgency. Biometric match. Classification level exceeds facility authorization. Lockdown initiated. Voss is still at his desk when the doors to the accessions office seal automatically. For the first time since he pulled her folder off the counter that morning, he does not feel like the smartest person in the room. He picks up his phone and calls Reyes again. It rings 4 times and goes to voicemail. He does not try a second time. Some part of him, the part that has spent 8 years learning to read a room even when he refuses to admit it, already understands that whatever is happening outside that door will not end with an apology from her. He is still there 4 minutes later when 3 sedans and a security detail pull into the lot outside, moving with the unhurried precision of people who have done this before and know exactly how it ends. Doors open in sequence, driver first, then the rear passenger doors. The choreography of protocol executed the same way it has been executed 1,000 times before, for people far more senior than anyone currently standing in this hallway. 3 general officers walk through the front doors first, flanked by 2 liaison officers from a command most of the building's staff have only ever heard referenced in briefings they weren't cleared to attend. The senior of the 3 wears 3 stars and a chest of ribbons that stretch back further than most of the soldiers in this hallway have been alive. He does not look rushed. Men who move at this pace rarely need to. Nobody announces them. Nobody needs to. 11 soldiers in the reception area come to attention one by one, the way a wave collects itself before it breaks. Voss steps out of his office to find out what's happening and finds himself standing in a hallway suddenly full of rank he has spent his entire career being intimidated by. "Where is she?" the lead general says. It isn't a question. The duty sergeant leads them to the holding room. When the door opens, she is already standing, watch still on her wrist. Posture exactly regulation, despite 2 hours on a metal bench. The senior general studies her for a long moment. Then, he does something Voss has never seen a general officer do without hesitation. He salutes first. It happens before anyone explains anything, before a single word is spoken about who she is or why 3 stars just walked through a routine accessions office. The gesture is slow, precise, the crisp formal angle of respect earned rather than owed. Behind him, the 2 liaison officers follow half a second later. That's when her sleeve, still rolled from the processing room, catches on the doorframe as she steps forward and rides up just enough to expose a tattoo along the inside of her forearm. Not decorative. Heraldic. Crossed arrows beneath a small black raven, the unofficial mark carried only by a detachment whose actual designation doesn't exist on any public record, whose actual casualties are still listed, 7 years later, as classified pending review. Delgado, standing near the back of the hallway, goes rigid. His hand drifts halfway to a salute before his brain catches up to what his body already recognizes. He has seen that mark exactly once before, on a folder he was ordered to forget existed. The room detonates into silence, and silence here is not the absence of sound. It has weight. A tablet slips from a captain's hand near the door and clatters against the tile, the sound obscene in the stillness. Somewhere behind Voss, someone exhales like they've been holding their breath since the lockdown began. The overhead lights hum louder than they did a minute ago, the way ordinary sounds always do once every voice in a room stops at the same time. Somewhere down the hall, a printer that has spent all day running background checks finishes its queue and falls silent too, as if even the machines in this building understand there is nothing left worth processing tonight. Master Sergeant Alina Cross, the lead general says, loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. Operational Detachment Alpha, missing, presumed killed, Al-Hasaka, 7 years ago. Reactivated under classified authority as of 1900 hours tonight. He turns, deliberately, toward Voss. Every person in this building, including myself as of this evening, currently answers to her clearance level. One by one, the room finishes what the generals started. The duty sergeant, then 2 soldiers still holding tablets near the door. Then, last of all, the corporal who laughed loudest that morning near the coffee station, his salute arriving a full 3 seconds behind everyone else's, the delay somehow louder than if he hadn't moved at all. Voss says nothing. His face cycles through surprise, then something close to denial, and finally settles into an expression that looks almost like fear. Not theatrical, not performed for an audience this time, because for the first time all day there is no audience left for him to perform for. Everyone in the room is looking at her, not him. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a slow structural collapse visible only in the small things. His hand unsure where to rest, his weight shifting off one foot and onto the other. A man discovering in real time that his collar rank has just become the least relevant thing in the building. "Sir," he manages. "I didn't." "You flagged a returning operative's reactivation as a security discrepancy," the general says, and detained her without authorization inside a building with clearance limits you don't have visibility into. We'll discuss what you didn't do in a room that isn't this hallway. Cross doesn't gloat. She doesn't look at Voss at all. She adjusts her sleeve back down over the tattoo with the same mechanical precision she's shown all day, retrieves her folder from the processing desk, and turns to Delgado instead. "You clocked the grip," she says. It isn't a question. 38 years, he says. You learn to notice what doesn't fit a manual. She almost smiles. Almost behind them, 2 agents from the liaison team have already opened a second folder. The one that started this. The one Voss never got to see the contents of. The one containing 7 years of unanswered questions about who inside the command structure buried the original compromise report that got her team killed. The signature at the bottom of that original report belongs to a Colonel Voss knows well. The same colonel who told him 20 minutes earlier over a phone line to make this problem disappear through paperwork rather than escalation. Her reactivation isn't the end of anything. It's the start of an investigation that will take both their careers down a much longer corridor than the one Voss is standing in now, quietly, through subpoenaed emails and formal charges, without a single raised voice. By the time she leaves the building, the sky over the installation has gone the deep orange purple of a Carolina sunset in late summer, the kind of color that makes even a place built entirely of concrete and razor wire look, for a few minutes, almost peaceful. She sits alone on the steps of the transient quarters they've assigned her for the night, watch reading 2114, and lets herself, for the first time all day, simply breathe without counting it. They mocked her application. They forgot that the file underneath it had never stopped outranking the men who laughed at it first. Justice, in her experience, is rarely loud. It moves through revoked clearances and quiet reassignments, through officers who disappear from a duty roster without an announcement, through paperwork nobody in the mess hall will ever gossip about because nobody in the mess hall will ever see it. Voss will learn this over the coming weeks, in rooms with no windows, in front of officers who don't raise their voices either. Patience isn't weakness. It never was. Silence is a weapon, too. She has simply always been better at wielding it than the men who mistook it for surrender. 2 floors below her temporary quarters, in a secure conference room she will never see, a different kind of reckoning is already underway. Colonel Reyes's name has moved from a phone log to an evidence file in the span of a single evening, and by morning, an Inspector General's team neither he nor Voss anticipated will be reviewing 7 years of correspondence neither man thought anyone would ever read again. She will not be there to see any of it. The subpoenas, the closed-door testimony, the quiet reassignment orders, stamped and mailed, without ceremony. By the time Reyes understands what has actually reached his desk, she will already be 3 states away, boarding a transport that doesn't appear on any manifest anyone and that accessions office will ever be cleared to read. Somewhere in the reactivation packet the liaison team handed her before she left, there's a single name still flagged unresolved. 1. Identity. Redacted 7 years ago from the compromise report that got her team killed in Al-Hasaka. Never confirmed, never closed. A name somebody buried on purpose, long before Voss ever had a chance to bury anything of his own. She thinks of the 6 names again, the way she has every evening for 7 years, and for the first time in just as long. Thinking of them doesn't feel like carrying something alone. Somewhere in a database that didn't exist this morning, her name has just been quietly restored to a roster she never expected to rejoin. The other 6 are still waiting for the same courtesy. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt.